Today we have a very special guest for you guys. We are joined by Ronald Drabkin. He's the author of Beverly Hills Spy, the double agent war hero who helped Japan attack Pearl Harbor, which you can find the links below. Thank you for joining us, Ron. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thanks.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. So, I know most Americans should be familiar with the attack on Pearl Harbor, but what most probably don't realize is that the Japanese were actually spying on Pearl Harbor and sending reports back to Tokyo that helped make the attack come to fruition. So, I guess I didn't know about a lot of this stuff for a long time. How did you kind of come to learn about this and really start to dive deep into these espionage activities?
Simple answer. My dad was working for U.S. Intelligence, and after he passed away, I just got curious. I started reading everything I could to try to figure out what Dad was doing, and I never found out too much, to to be honest. I guess still classified or something.
Okay.
But I learned all about the Japanese and the Pearl Harbor stuff, and I just thought it was fascinating, and wrote a book.
Yeah, I saw that on your Wikipedia page that, yeah, your dad worked for, which I was shocked, by the way, very impressive that you have a Wikipedia page, and that your dad worked for the FBI and that you actually got into all these classified documents and were actually like kind of the first person even to maybe even see these classified documents.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of fun. If you ever, always tell people that, anyone can ask the FBI. They're really friendly. You go to their website and you say like, "Hey, I want to know, do you have a file on certain person?" And they'll answer you really quick. And yeah, they either will say, "Yes, here you go," or "We don't have anything for you." But no harm asking.
Interesting. I would not have expected that. All
No.
right. So I guess what is the year that everything kind of starts here? And was it a group of people? Was it one person doing the spying here?
Yeah, so for the actual on the ground in Pearl Harbor, the Japanese effort, they had people going in and out before that, but there was really one guy that they sent in actually in March of 1941, so only about 8 months before the actual attack. Before that, they had a kind of few like mess ups, I would say. Yeah.
What were those mess ups? I'm actually not familiar with that at all.
Well, the Japanese always had problems hiring spies in the U.S. It was,
Interesting.
the Soviets could easily find a spy, right? They just go to your local, college campus, look for the communist group, and then hire someone, right?
Uh
Who's an American, right? But the Japanese couldn't do that, and so they had this fellow Frederick Rutland in California who was doing the industrial stuff, and they hired a Nazi dude actually who was living his dream life in Hawaii.
huh.
And they not quickly, but they sort of figured out that hiring these Westerners, they weren't Japanese, right? And they wanted
Hmm.
to make money. And looking at the memos, they'd all be like, these Germans and British we hire to spy on the Americans. It's like they want money and they don't want to work very hard.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're like, we got to send some of those Japanese over, and so that's what they did.
Okay. Okay. Cool. So you mentioned Takeo Yoshikawa here. So who is that? Was that someone who was born in Japan, or was that a Japanese American?
Yeah, he was Japanese. There was almost zero usage of Japanese Americans. But anyway, yeah, Yoshikawa was a Japanese Navy officer who they decided they needed someone in Hawaii to scout out before the attack, and that was him. He was fairly young, Naval Academy graduate, one of the top of his class, and he had a kind of a funny backstory. He was so the Japanese Naval Academy was just brutal back then, really really
Hmm.
tough, and he got through that okay, but I guess he wasn't really the strongest physically. And after a couple of years in the Navy, he just wasn't physically in good shape. He kept getting sick and stuff, and they sent him home. And he had nothing to do. He's this bright young guy.
Hmm.
And he spent his time learning English and reading English books and reading about Sherlock Holmes and that kind of stuff. And when they needed a spy, they needed someone who, understood English, right?
Hmm.
And he was a smart guy, like I say, top of the class. And they chose him and they sent him on a ship to Hawaii. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. And you said he got there in March of 1941.
Hmm.
And so did
So,
he immediately start spying, or did he just like try to familiarize himself or start to like blend in with the native population there? Or like what exactly did he do, I guess, when he arrived there?
well, his cover story was he was an embassy employee,
Okay.
stamping passports or whatever, and it was pretty crunch time, right? Eight months before an attack, right?
Mm-hmm.
They had him, doing it right away, and the knowledge they had was a little low,
Okay.
and so some of the stuff he did was just absolutely hilarious to me. Renting he'd bring he found a girlfriend, right?
Uh-huh.
And he'd say, "Oh, let's take one of these little." Even today you can fly around Pearl Harbor, Honolulu in a little plane, right?
Okay.
You pay by the hour to like
Uh-huh.
get a little tour. So you pay for an hour flight around the harbor. Take some pictures. It's a
Uh-huh.
pretty good. It's a pretty cover story, right? I'm on a date and I want to take pictures, right?
Okay.
One of the favorite thing, well, I think maybe the favorite thing that I like the most that he did was, so Pearl Harbor's it's fairly shallow, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the biggest questions the Japanese Navy had was, the most effective weapon is a torpedo,
Mm-hmm.
and when you launch a torpedo from a plane, they don't go very deep, but when they're first dropped in, they go fairly deep, and then they come back up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the question was, would they drop the torpedo? Would it hit the ground? Would it hit the bottom of the harbor,
Uh-huh.
right? Like if they go in there, they drop the torpedoes, and they all kind of hit the bottom of the harbor and get stuck there. Then the whole attack is useless, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so they had developed some new torpedoes that could run a little more shallow, but they weren't sure exactly how shallow it was. And so what this guy did, Yoshikawa, was he got a loincloth and he got a bamboo tube, and he just went over the harbor and waded out and just waded out on the bottom of the ocean with this little tube, right?
Uh-huh.
And reported out how deep it was, and they were able to do the math, and they practiced, on a shallow bay in Japan, and realized, yep, this will work, and yeah, so that was a good example of what he was doing.
Huh. All right, so that brings two questions to mind for me. So I guess the first thing is where did he like go into the water at? Like was it just like right outside the perimeter of the base or
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a fairly big harbor, right?
uh-huh.
So, yeah,
Okay, interesting. And how did he measure the depth? Did he just like eyeball it?
yeah. I mean, he had a bamboo tube of a certain length, right?
Uh-huh.
And you just take the length of that tube and how far it is to the top, and adds his body length, and there you go, right?
Interesting. I can't even imagine. Like, I'm just like picturing it in my mind right now, like him like doing that, and that's like a hilarious visual. And also the fact that like nobody even noticed him doing that is funny to me also. And what is the
Yeah,
depth of the harbor? Is it like I always forget? Is it like 60 feet or 40 feet? I always forget what
it's like
the
40.
40.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
So,
So yeah, I guess not too deep. You would be able to somewhat guess from there. So like when he was going up in these airplanes, were none of the pilots ever wondering like, what is this guy doing?
didn't seem like it. I mean, there's a lot of tourists out there, right?
Uh huh.
And that was the only way to see, like, from the beach or from the perimeter. You can only see certain things, right? The
Uh
island in the
huh.
middle. You would need to see that from above. Yeah.
Okay, and so did he just like kind of use different pilots every time? Because I imagine like after so many flights, if it's the same guy, he might be like, "Why are you wanting to fly over Pearl Harbor all the time?"
Yeah. There's no record of any of the pilots saying anything. So
Interesting.
um,
I guess it's also
yeah,
like retrospective, where like we have the perspective, of like he was spying for an attack to happen, and that probably never entered anybody's mind back then at all.
yeah. I think that's right. One of the
So
other things he. Oh, go
was it
ahead.
the taxi? Was the taxi a thing that he did as well? Because I'm trying to. I know he used a lot of different vehicles and stuff like that.
Um, yeah, there was taxis, but a lot of it was really visual. Like Pearl Harbor, like most harbors, they got mountains around them or hills.
Okay.
So, like, there was, for example, a Japanese tea house, on the hill overlooking the harbor. So, if you wanted to like see what ships were in the harbor, that was fairly easy, right?
Interesting. Do
Yeah.
you know is that still there? That tea house?
I don't believe so. I don't believe
Okay,
so.
that's what I'm gonna have to try to find some photos from like back then and like try to overlay with today because I'm assuming today. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm just assuming that you can't get into a lot of these areas that he was at back then.
I think that is right, but then from the hills you can see pretty well.
Okay. Okay.
Um, yeah, one of the other things he did, which I find hilarious, is he decided to disguise himself as a Filipino chef, and he got a job at a restaurant.
Okay.
And so what he said he did was he was basically at the beach every day trying to get really tan to look more Filipino. Which I don't know. I don't know. I grew up with a lot of Filipinos, and I don't know that would work. But anyway,
I don't think it would either.
yeah. So he's doing that, and and the other thing was, so when is a good time to attack was another one of the the
Okay.
big questions. So basically, you want to attack when the ships were in port, in particular the aircraft carriers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so ships are going in and out every day. So when he's up, in the tea house overlooking the base, for example,
Mm-hmm.
he's basically counting ships.
Okay.
On Monday, there's these ships were there. On Tuesday, these ships were there.
Mm-hmm.
And what became pretty clear was the best time to attack is a Sunday morning, in particular the second and the fourth
Okay.
Sunday. That's when the most ships are there, right?
Okay.
What and then a lot of it, the kind of the ignorance and racism on both sides are pretty clear, but the commentary he and one of the other guys, the fellow and I wrote about in California, Frederick Rutland, they're saying is like Americans on Sunday morning, you want to attack them, and it's not just because they're in base, but
Uh-huh.
it's like on Sunday morning they're either drunk or they're in church. Either way,
Yeah.
they're just not paying attention, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you know, I guess we all have friends in the U.S. Navy. Yeah, I mean, sure they party, but you know, they do their jobs, right?
Yeah, well, it's even like the actual Pearl Harbor movie itself. They're the main characters are hungover and not awake yet when the attack starts. Even.
So yeah, so that's how that worked, and yeah, he was kind of there, and he's in the beginning they were like, don't send too many reports on where the ships are.
Okay.
Send them once every 10 days. You send too many reports, some message will get intercepted. The Americans will get suspicious. But then they were like, send reports on where the ships are every 3 days. And then they're like, send them every day. And he's
Okay.
like, wow. Like, what else am I going to do with my day? Right. I mean, so he
Was he
starts
getting
saying,
paid for his activities by, I assume, the Japanese government? Or
yeah, he just, he's on a standard Navy salary.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. And then, like, what was the process then? What did that look like of him? Like, so he goes and he marks down, whatever ships are here, and then he goes back to where he's living. What does it look like from there of him actually then making his report, and then like how does he send it? Who is he sending it to?
Yeah. It's a number of ships. It's like which ships, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're also very interested in like what they kind of like divide Pearl Harbor into zones,
Okay.
so they can figure out where to attack, right? And so like
Uh-huh.
which ships are in what zones, right? But then he goes back, he writes it up. Since he's a member of the embassy,
Uh-huh.
uh, he can either send them by the Japanese code, the embassy diplomatic code, or by some courier.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned the zones thing. So I am somewhat familiar with that.
Mm.
The one message that I think this was the only message, I could be wrong. But the one message that did somewhat raise alarm with the Americans was the message that he sent where he had Pearl Harbor divided into grids or
Yeah.
whatever, but like nothing came of that as far as I'm aware.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
Interesting. Yeah, you would have thought that that would have maybe tipped off some people, but
Yeah.
I guess it didn't. And he is also that was just going between embassies, right? So like I guess they weren't monitoring embassy traffic too much just because of the volume of it.
Yeah. And they were definitely decoding the Japanese diplomatic efforts, but they certainly couldn't get to everything, right?
Because yeah, I think it was like purple or whatever. We already had that decoded or whatever. But yeah, it was just like I said, the volume or whatever. They just couldn't keep track of everything and also just never put it together. I think there was, like you said, a lot of ignorance also on the American side about everything up until literally the bombs were falling.
Yeah, that's right.
Interesting. So was he trained then as a spy, or was it just like his Naval Academy training helped him a lot? Like how did he, or did he just like learn as he did it? Like he was writing the rule book of spying?
It's kind of crazy. There was no training for any Japanese spies.
Okay.
They didn't have a spy school. The Japanese army had a spy school.
Hmm.
No Japanese Navy person went there. The Navy and the army weren't getting along, right? What they did was they picked out these guys who were like just top of the, like Naval Academy grad, top of the class kind of thing.
Okay.
So these are really, really talented folks, and they basically
Mm-hmm.
said figure it out. But one of his things he was when he was laid up and studying, he would read Sherlock Holmes, right?
Okay.
And when he was prepping for the Hawaii position, he read Lawrence of Arabia.
Oh, okay.
Is that the best prep for being a spy? I would say no.
Yeah, I was trying to like connect in my mind how like what he took away from that was like help him so much in his career.
Yeah, but they really didn't. They didn't really have any real training at all, which was to their detriment. I think one thing that comes to mind is if you read about the Japanese spies at the time, they were drunk and they were womanizing quite a bit.
Of
And
course.
just remember, with my dad, right? He didn't talk too much about his actual service,
Uh-huh.
but it's not like an FBI agent's like getting absolutely bombed, shit faced in a bar, right?
Uh-huh.
That
Yeah.
doesn't, yeah, it's it just you're not allowed to do that, right?
Uh-huh. So he basically just showed up and it was like, all right, this is your objective, figure out how to do everything.
Yep.
Well, he did a pretty good job then, considering he had like no instruction essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess so things also were much more lax back then though, probably than they are today. It was probably, I would assume, a lot easier back then to do things.
Yeah, I think things were not as professional in general for in a lot of areas.
What do you think the most crucial piece of information that he sent over was then?
I think it's, as I said, it was just, when to attack.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible? And where the ships are going to be and like where the targets are. I think that's there's that. Oh, the nets as well. He went to check.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Really worried about the torpedo nets, which were not there.
Yeah, I believe, yeah, they were shocked that we had no protection set up at all.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you think they would have gone through with the attack if they did not get the information that they got from him?
Uh, well, that's kind of a tough one. I think they would have really. I mean, you don't go in blind, right? I
Uh
mean,
huh.
if there were torpedo nets around the ships, again, the attack would not have worked,
Mm-hmm.
and they wouldn't have done that. I don't think. Yeah.
Okay, I was just wondering about that because I'm currently reading At Dawn We Slept, and I'm not even to the attack because it's like, what, like 800 pages? I'm like 250 pages in right now, and we're still only in like October, I believe. But like the main thing I've been taking away is I didn't realize there was so much like drama and like debate on the Japanese side of like people not believing that the attack would work or like not wanting to go through with it. And Yamamoto was like, in his little inner circle are basically the only ones that truly believed that it could be successful. So I just find that interesting, even with like all the information that they gave him or that he gave to them, that there was still so much doubt of like, this is probably not going to work.
Yeah. Exactly. That's exactly right. Yep.
So I guess what did it look like then leading up to like, let's say like a week out from the attack? Was he still trying to send daily reports? Was he like literally the day before like sending a report of like these ships are here, these ships aren't here?
He was sending reports, but at some point it was like it was kind of too late to it was locked in, right?
Uh-huh.
At that point, the attacking fleet was on radio silence,
Okay.
so they could pick up transmissions, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but they weren't transmitting out, and everything's locked and loaded, so there really wasn't much to do in that last few days to a week.
Okay. And then what was he doing then, I guess, as the attack started? Because did he even know that the attack was going to be taking place that morning?
He did not, but he was certainly well. let me rephrase that. They never told him that. He was starting to get more and more suspicious as he went.
Okay.
In particular, they were told to on the day of the attack to burn their code books and stuff. So
Okay.
that's usually
Yeah,
burn your code
something's
books.
going on, yeah.
Yeah.
And is there any record of what he was then doing like during the attack? Did he go outside and just watch it occur?
Yeah, there wasn't much you could do at that point, right? Just might as well just look around and see what's going on.
Yeah, I assume there's nothing about this, but I would just be interested to know kind of what he felt as he was watching that and it like dawning on him like that this is because of me essentially in a way.
Yeah, he did talk a lot about that actually in his
Okay.
post-mortem. Yeah, and I think a fair statement is he felt humbled.
Hmm.
I mean, excited but humbled. It's like, why me? Right?
Okay.
Like he's like, I'm a small town boy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here I am in the middle of, you know, everything, right?
Yeah, one of the
Literally
biggest
making,
events in human history.
like literally making history.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just knowing he'd go home and be a hero, and just yeah,
Okay. And one of the things that's always interesting to me about spies is like the whole escape or getting out of the situation that they're in. So, what kind of happened then, I guess, after the attack happened? Did agents immediately show up to his place? Like, was he on their radar?
yeah. He wasn't really on their radar, no, but he was part of the embassy.
Okay.
Including, and so what happened, same thing happened in Tokyo at the U.S. Embassy as did in the Japanese Embassy in the U.S. and the consulate at Pearl Harbor was, everyone was interned very quickly.
Okay.
So, the cops come out and they put people in some kind of holding pen of some sort.
Hmm.
And, obviously, with U.S. Embassy staff in Tokyo, you're not going to abuse the the Japanese embassy consulate people in the U.S.,
Uh
right?
huh. Yeah.
So what they do is they do negotiations to exchange embassy personnel.
Okay.
It went through the Swedes. Yeah,
That makes
the
sense.
Swedes negotiated it, and eventually what happened was there was a big prisoner swap. Not,
Okay.
sorry, prisoner swap. They're not prisoners per se. Embassy employee and
Yeah.
civilian national swap, where they sent a boat. They actually met in Africa, in
Oh,
Mozambique.
interesting.
Yeah, so like a Swedish ship left Washington D.C. with about 1,000 Japanese civilians and embassy personnel, and likewise going the other way from Tokyo to Mozambique
Okay.
with U.S. Diplomatic and embassy folks and stuff. And in Mozambique, there they did a swap. And I always forget, is it Mozambique or Angola? Anyway, over there in Africa, and they swap it on the ships, and the ships go back. And so he got back to Japan in, I think it was April or May of 1942.
Okay, so when he was arrested, it was more so just because he was associated with the embassy. Like they didn't know at all that he had a part in the attack.
Right, right.
Okay. What was his life like in Japan then for the rest of his life?
Yeah, it was. If the interviews with him they're kind of a little heartrending in my opinion, that he went from like hero to goat.
Okay.
So he started out as like really the hero, right? Everyone knew this is the guy that was on the ground in Pearl Harbor, biggest Japanese victory ever, blah
Uh
blah
huh.
blah. And he was living that up. But when the war ended, he actually got blamed. The Japanese Navy and the Japanese politicians were fairly unpopular in a lot of circles.
Okay.
They had gotten their country wrecked, right, attacking the U.S. And he was getting a lot of blame. And then it was even broader than that. The Japanese spying was used as a pretext for the internments of the Japanese Americans,
Mm-hmm.
which is another tragedy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, he was blamed for all of this stuff, right, in the U.S.
Interesting.
and in Japan. He was certainly, Japanese spy. Pearl Harbor was not going to be popular in the U.S. anyway, but even more so. And so he kind of went in hiding in a Buddhist monastery to write his memoirs, and
Oh
that's
wow.
how we know what he actually did. He wrote it all down. Of course, everyone's biased on their own
Mm-hmm.
stuff, but yeah, he's got a pretty good account. But what strikes me is the humanity of the guy, where he's really he went from like, I can't believe I'm in the middle of everything, I'm a hero, to I have to go into hiding because everyone hates me.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I'm the same guy.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, that's got to be tough to process, especially when like you're being blamed for stuff that's really not even your fault.
Yeah, he was following orders, right?
Yep, and he didn't even really know what he was doing either. As we've come to find out. So, how would you rate him as a spy? Do you think he could have done anything better? Did he like fail at anything? Did he do stuff like better than you would have expected him to do?
I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10.
Okay.
Um, so the one way to look at this thing was it was a great success. It was a
Mm-hmm.
big attack, U.S. Big damage, all kind of stuff. But the key point that was that they missed the American aircraft carriers,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the American counterattack was all driven by the aircraft carriers, and they sank battleships, which were, in the scheme of things, less important.
Uh huh.
And he was not able to figure that out,
Hmm.
right? His role was to find out when the Americans would be in port, and he found out when they would be in port in theory, but the key ships were not there.
Okay.
Um, and the reason why was, the question, I don't know how much we can blame him for this, but like he didn't really get human sources,
Okay.
right? Like if
Mm-hmm.
he had gotten, it would have been a rough thing to expect, right? But if he had
Yeah.
had the American ship schedules, he would have been able to say when the aircraft carrier was going to be in town.
Yeah, I don't even know what he could have done for that without raising a bunch of suspicion besides, just like sitting in a bar that certain people frequent or something and over time gaining their trust somewhat. But yeah, still that'd be, I don't even think he could have got that information really, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, so that's why it's maybe he wasn't really set up for success
Uh huh.
in that respect. But
Okay.
yeah, but his job was to find out when to attack, and when
Mm-hmm.
he did it, the key ships weren't there, and we can discuss whose fault that was. But anyway, he wasn't able to get that done.
And was that, I don't want to open a huge rabbit hole here, but I'm honestly blanking now. Why were the carriers not even in Pearl Harbor that day? Was that a usual thing or normal thing that they might not have been there that day? Or is that like an exception thing that they were gone that day?
One of them is just delivering planes to a local island. Like,
Oh,
oh,
that's
send
right.
some fighter planes over here, right? So it was pretty. I guess it was pretty random. One of the ships was one of the aircraft carriers was actually under repairs in on the West Coast.
Oh, okay.
So that should have been picked up by somebody,
Hmm.
you would think, right?
So actually, speaking of the West Coast, then were there spies then? Because we already talked about their spies on the mainland of Hawaii, but were there spies actually in the continental United States then?
I wrote about that in my book, Beverly Hills Spy. There were not that many because a lot of them had gotten rounded up just a couple of months before.
Oh, so they were on lists then or knew about. Okay.
Yeah, so a lot of them, a couple of the Japanese, they had one guy in LA, one in Seattle, and they had been arrested and sent home just beforehand.
So again, not to open a huge rabbit hole here, but I'm interested. What comes to my mind is why are these people even on a list before this happens?
I think it gets back to what we were talking about no training, the
Okay.
drinking, the womanizing,
Uh huh.
some of the tradecraft problems. One of my favorites is the LA spy. He was driving around the Navy base in San Pedro, and the one in San Diego and such.
Mm-hmm.
Again, with a girlfriend as his cover.
Uh-huh.
There was other reasons for that other than just cover. But anyway, he was doing it in his car with a license plate, his license plate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the American, the guards at the base were like, "Oh, it's a suspicious car. Let's write down the license plate." Oh, okay, this
Hmm.
is registered to a guy who's a Japanese naval attaché at the consulate, right?
Okay.
I mean, it's pretty spycraft 101, I would assume.
Okay, so it kind of just takes like one thing, and then once they get that one piece of information, it's kind of easy for them to then connect the dots.
Yeah, it's okay. This guy from the Japanese consulate, is driving around all the U.S. Navy bases. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
that would definitely raise some eyebrows.
I mean, there was other reasons as well, but it's sort of not great tradecraft.
Okay, so everything back then was just kind of less professional and kind of just you're more on your own and just figure out how to send us this information that we need.
Yeah, it seemed kind of arrogant, really, in a way.
Interesting. Well,
Yeah,
definitely, I'm very intrigued by the whole California episode, but we might have to save that for another time here because we're already, I guess we're at 32 minutes already. I didn't realize.
for sure, for sure.
See, that's my problem is I can talk forever about this stuff and questions just keep coming to mind. That's why I figured I was like we could probably talk for an hour easily just about the Pearl Harbor stuff even.
Right?
And so
Yeah.
yeah, definitely we'll have to probably make everything else into an episode on its own of the California stuff, and then the Mexico stuff is very interesting to me because I saw even in Takeo's Wikipedia here it says that
Yeah.
he passed on what was it here? Oh, while on intelligence duty, it intercepted a shortwave radio message in plain English that 17 troop transports were en route to England, having cleared the port of Freetown, and he passed this information to the German embassy, and many of the ships were destroyed as a result, and then he actually received a personal letter of thanks from Adolf Hitler. So I find that interesting, I guess, I guess there was cooperation going on between the Japanese and the Germans with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, a lot of that is still classified, and
Oh,
I'm
really? To
awaiting.
this day it is?
Yeah,
Huh.
there's one that I've actually there was a big Japanese meeting place slash bar slash house of ill repute, and I wrote the National Archives, and they agreed to declassify the files there, and that was 3 years ago,
Oh, wow.
and so it could show up any day. But yes, there was definitely um, coordination, in particular the Mexican. Mexico City is very high up.
Uh-huh.
It's in the mountains, right? And so when the Japanese put in their radio transmitters and receivers to intercept U.S. Radio communications,
Uh-huh.
by putting in Mexico City, they could get the Atlantic Ocean radio traffic as well.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah. Which was, of course, more interesting for the Germans than it was for themselves.
Uh-huh. Huh. That's interesting. Yeah, because I know like everybody knows that Japan and Germany were allies, but it's like kind of a weird relationship of allies. It's not like England and like the United States and stuff like that where they're like on the ground fighting together. So I've
Yeah.
always been like somewhat uninformed and uneducated of like fully what the relationship was there, between
Mm.
them. Because I know they interacted some, but they kind of didn't, but they also did at the same time. So it's kind of weird.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this has been awesome. I already tried to, I guess, like get into multiple rabbit holes with you here about California and Mexico City, and I won't say anything else about those because we're already coming up on 35 minutes here, and I assume that each of those things could even be another 40 minutes each themselves. So we'll
For
definitely have
sure.
to save that for another time here, and hopefully get you back on here soon.
Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for coming on. I appreciate you taking the time to come and talk with us about a subject that I don't think many people have probably heard about or are familiar with.
Yeah. No, my pleasure.
All right, well, thank you. Everybody have a great day.
Hey, bye.